Sapna in Hindi means dream. SEWA is hosting a space for peer-to-peer support where our South Asian families can connect and discuss their mutual needs and available support services for neurodiverse individuals. We want to bridge the gap and provide resources so we can help families realize and reach their goals. One way we are doing that is through this podcast, in which we will bring in different members of the community who are autistic or have experience with autism in order to share more with our wider community. Sapna meets Fridays at 11:30 a.m. Email sapna at sewa-aifw.org for more information.
Hi Feroza, can you please tell us about yourself? How long you've been in Minnesota and how you personally related to the person with autism?
I'm Feroza Mehta, and I have lived in Minnesota since 2007. I can't believe it's been that long, but we love it here. And I am autistic, recently found out 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. And my son, who is now 13, is also autistic. And we found out about his diagnosis just maybe about 6 days shy of his second birthday.
Well, that's something. So that was my question. Next question was that how did you come to know about autism, and what was it like learning all about the autism?
It's hard. I remember when he was born. He's my firstborn, so I had nothing to compare it to. I am the youngest child of 3 kids. So I never had that younger sibling to go on, never had family around. So this baby was just, I'm like, oh, this is a regular baby. And I brought him home, and there were signs of some difficulties from the beginning. Trouble with nursing, trouble with his stomach. So when he would nurse, he would get horrible acid reflux.
Oh, sure.
So I remember my kids are really close in age. I have my son, and then I have my daughter who's 12, and so they are 14 months apart.
Oh.
And when she was born, I called her the easy baby, because with my son, I would burp him. This might be too much information, but I would burp him, and I would have the spit cloth ready because it would be like projectiles.
Oh, no.
And then I would catch it. Oh. And with my daughter, I was ready to spit it up, and it was like a tiny little bit. And I remember I wiped her mouth, picked her up, looked her like this, and I said, "Oh, you're the easy baby." Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then just like those differences, the difficulty sleeping, difficulty with eating, and transitions from nursing to the bottle, that was difficult. I remember he would not go to the bottle at all. Very stubborn. I had to hide in my bedroom, and my husband was with my son trying to get him to take the bottle. He's like, no, not going to do it, not going to do it. And he cried for hours. We're living in an apartment building by Lake Calhoun, our poor neighbors. And then he finally took the bottle. And then my husband had to work that evening because he's a physician. And he's like, okay, here's Aiden. He'll be fine. He'll take the bottle. Nope, still stubborn. 3-4 hours, and then finally he just looked at me, and I said, "Will you take the bottle now?" And he's like this. And then he took it. So just those little differences.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you kind of pick up a little bit from the childhood. You knew there was something different.
Yeah.
With him and her. So, and can you tell us how the whole family is dealing with this?
Well, in the beginning, it's hard because when you're a parent and you have your baby, you have these expectations for them. They're going to grow up. They're going to get married. I remember with my mother, I was holding my son and just admiring him. I'm sitting in my rocking chair, and I looked at his ring finger on his left hand, and I said to my mom, "Aw, who's going to put a ring on his finger?" And then my mom says, "Oh, is she even born yet?" I'll never forget that. So, and yes, just because he's autistic doesn't mean he won't get married, but just those expectations change. Like I thought, oh, he'll grow up, maybe he'll be a doctor like his father, maybe he'll be a journalist like me. And just those extra hurdles that he has to go through, and will he be able to get to those milestones and those things in life that we all expect? that reckoning with the expectations. How do you reconcile what you had hoped with the realities of what may come? And how do you put away those hopes for the future and only focus on the present to give your child those tools to have a successful life? I think especially in our culture, and maybe not even in our culture, maybe in a lot of people, we always have these expectations that we put on our children, and then we judge ourselves by how well our children do. And
It's so true.
and even
That's
in
true.
society in general, how your children do is a reflection upon you.
Parents.
So so it's just extra sensitive. Like, I remember going to parties before I told people about his diagnosis. I remember when he was diagnosed around age 2, I needed time to process that. I remember driving home, like, there's different types of diagnoses that you can get. So his school board, we reached out to them. And at the time, we lived in Hopkins School District. So the process is you call this place called, Help Me Grow. And it's a line. And then they send a social worker. Social worker evaluates the child, has questions. And then if the social worker thinks that your child needs further evaluation, they send people in from the school district. So Hopkins School District came in, and it was one speech pathologist, one special education teacher who specializes in early childhood education. And they came in, met my son, tried to play with him a little bit. Keep in mind he's 2. And then they said, great, we need you to bring him in for something called an ADOS test, an ADOS. And that test is different depending on the age of your child. So I brought him in. It's a different lady who had been trained to give the test. And it's basically, how does your child play? That's one of the key components. And I remember she put Aiden down to play with a doll. And then she said, I have some Play-Doh here. And he'd never played with Play-Doh before. So, and then she puts Play-Doh down, and she's like, it's baby's birthday. Let's make a cake for baby. So took out the Play-Doh. She made a little cake out of it, encouraged him to play. And she's like, this is a candle. Let's put the candle. I'm thinking in my head, I never play with my kid like this, but okay, let's see how he does. And then she puts the candle in, and then they pretend to sing happy birthday. And he had fun with it, but he wasn't really attentive to it at all. And then she said, after it was done, she just was like looking at her notes, making all these notes. And she said, do you want me to tell you now, or do you want me to write up the report and you'll just get it in the mail? And I thought to myself, let's rip off the Band-Aid now and get it over with. So I just said, okay, you can tell me. And she said, I am really sorry, but your child is moderate to severely autistic. And then I cried. And there's going to be a lot of people out there who are angry at me, like adult autistic, saying like, oh, why did you cry? Your child's perfectly fine the way he is. And that's true. But my argument as a parent is that when you have a child who to this day thought was like neurotypical, which is the term we use for people who are not autistic, and then you have this new diagnosis, there's a lot of questions that come in your mind. Like,
Sure.
everything changes in that moment. So after that, like, what do you do? And I remember driving home, going down this one road towards my house. There's a rental house at the time, and my mom was visiting. So I dropped him off with my mom, and I said, I'll be back. I'm going to the grocery store. I eliminated all gluten from his diet because my sister-in-law also has a son on the spectrum. So I just changed his guide to gluten-free. And I don't think I told my mom for a couple days. And then I told her, and she's like, I thought so.
There's something with that, right?
She's like, that's why I went and got all the gluten-free things. And then my father was not there. And I remember she called him, and she said, this is how the test went. And he was diagnosed with autism. My dad was so upset he hung up the phone.
Oh.
And then my in-laws were really sweet about it. They said, we thought that something was there, but how do you tell someone, right? It's hard to tell.
That's your grandchild
Yeah.
too.
But they were sweet. Like, I remember being sad and, like, sitting in my bed. And then my husband has something called Poland syndrome, which he's totally neurotypical. But it's just this hand. The right hand was not formed properly. So my in-laws were one of the first people to do a surgery to separate the fingers for him. And they always raised him in a way where that's just a part of your body. It doesn't define who you are. So they're the same way. So my mother-in-law, my husband told them, and she's like, put your wife on the phone now. So I'm talking, and she's like, this is not your fault. Not your fault. And I know as a mother that you will go through every month of your pregnancy and think about, what did I do wrong? Did I eat this? Did I go here? And what did I do wrong? The thing is that you did nothing wrong. So I want people out there who are listening to this, that you did absolutely nothing wrong. Not your fault. It is just a neurotype, which means their brain is just a different way. Like going back to what autism is and thinking about the human brain. Our human brain is how we interact with the world and how we see it. So we have the 5 senses. So sight, touch, hearing, taste, and I missed one.
Vision.
Vision. Yeah. So what autism is just a different way of people experiencing the world using those senses. That's what I like to tell people. So with my son, his hearing is way better than anyone else that I know. He can pick up sounds that I don't know how he can do that. And his memory is amazing. He remembers things from when he was 18 months old. To which my husband says, oh gosh, you're in trouble, because if you did something when he was little, he's going to remember it. So, yeah. And it's just a different way of interacting with the world. And if that's what I personally define autism as. So.
Yeah, before we continue.
That was very interesting, Feroza. And I know you just mentioned something about the different culture, and I know it's an Asian culture from India. Can you tell us a little bit about how the stigmatization with autism and our culture works?
I can only give like what I've seen. So personally, we didn't tell anybody for a year. We thought maybe all the early childhood interventions out there would assist him in a way that he would blend in more. But then after a year, I realized that this is something that is lifelong. It is not going to change. It's just who he is. So we need to tell people, because otherwise if he has a meltdown or a tantrum, they are just going to think, oh, he's a bad child, or they're terrible parents, they can't discipline their child. So one time we were out at just like a party with all our friends in another friend's backyard, and Aiden, I can't remember what he did, and I just told my friends, okay, he is autistic. We found out a year ago. And then all our friends were like, we would never have known if you had not told us. So, and this is what the problem is in the community that I see. Even people don't talk about it. They don't. And it's like they're afraid of other people knowing that they'll be judged, that they did something wrong.
Right.
Or if I tell people, this child who has this diagnosis might be stigmatized themselves, maybe they'll never get married, maybe because of that diagnosis no one will marry the other neurotypical or non-autistic kids that I have. That's something I've noticed. But actually people are really supportive. But not all people are. I remember dropping my son off at preschool. In our school district, which is Edina, there's an early childhood special education program. So it was 3 mornings a week I would drop him off. And there was another couple that had just moved from India. There's a lot of people, and especially in the Twin Cities, who come here on a temporary visa. They work for Tata Consultancy Services or any other company. And I remember young husband, young wife, their child was a boy, 3 or 4 years old. I think they were from Delhi. And I said, oh, it's great to see you here. I'm so glad that Aiden has a new playmate. And then they said, oh, there's nothing wrong with him. It's just the way that the people are educated here. That's what they said. They said they don't know anything. We'll just go back, and it's like this never happened. But just to keep this school system happy, we'll put him in special education. So this is a husband and wife. The next week comes around, and it's just the wife dropping off her son. She comes up to me and she says, we act that way because we don't want people to know about the diagnosis, because if my in-laws find out and I go home, not that they're going to hurt her, but they would kill her, she said.
Wow.
Because they would blame it on her. I never heard that before. That was the first time I've ever heard something like that.
Yeah.
And it's not just autism. I have a friend from grad school who has a child with dysgraphia, different type of neurological disability. And she said the same thing, that her in-laws would blame her. So that's another thing. And then for us, one time we were invited to this huge Diwali party at one like friend of a friend's house. They have a huge house up on a hill. It's like a gorgeous 1990s sort of place. She had done up the whole place. It looked gorgeous. And she said, bring your whole family. So I brought my kids. And with autism, you need time to adjust to a new place and a transition. So we found a quiet spot in the living room. Well, relatively quiet with our parties, you know. And I'm sitting down with him, and he just wants tickles on his arm, just like some tactile input to calm down. And another lady comes up, and this other lady has an adult son with a different disability. And she's like, oh, yeah, I brought my son here, and he said hi to everybody, but he doesn't like things like this, so we took him home. And then I was like, oh, yeah, Aiden's fine. He just needs like 10 minutes and he'll be totally fine. She's like, yeah, but you're going to take him home, right? And then I looked. She was looking above my head behind me. So I turned around, and the hostess was watching us. Like, she had told that lady to come tell me to take him home. Oh, you know what I did? I smiled at her, and I smiled at the hostess. And I'm like, oh, yeah, thank you for telling me what you do. But he's fine. And he was fine for the rest of the night. He played with the other kids. He ate some of the food. And, yeah, so you get roadblocks and everything. Like, we were so excited to finally be invited to this huge event because we're never invited places. We're invited places maybe once. And then from no fault of our own, we're never called back. Maybe my husband and I are weird. I don't know why. So, like, one time we were invited to a dinner party, and I never saw those people again. It's the worst, but it's not just Indians, because my husband had this colleague from work, Japanese-American guy, married to a white lady from, I think, Illinois or Michigan, a farm girl. And they had, at the time, 3 children. And they used to come over for barbecues. They were part of our friend group. They come over for barbecues and grilling parties. And we were in the kitchen. And she's like, yeah, you guys are so awesome for hosting these parties. It's so great. We would love to have you over, but... And then she's playing with her baby, and she says, how would Aiden do? We're worried he would throw something. I asked her, does he throw things here? She's like, no. She's like, oh, and then we were worried that we would have to put things away that he could break. And I said, but he doesn't break anything here. And then she said, yeah. And then I was really upset because these people were guests in my home. And I get where she's coming from. But it's painful and it's hurtful. So I said to her, and then at that point I was playing with her baby, and I said, why don't you go outside? I think they're done with grilling. You start eating. I'll be along in a minute. I just have to get something for dessert. I was so mad. I needed time to calm down. And I'm like, okay, I can't kick him out because it's my husband's colleague. So then I waited for them to go. Super nice, like icy sweet. Like I had learned from the Minnesota nice queens who are here that just kill them with kindness. So it was really nice. Suffered through the dinner, the dessert, chitter chatter. They left, and I said to my husband, they are never allowed back in my house ever again. Never again.
Yeah.
Never. And I've stuck to that.
I like your courage.
So,
and I also want to make a comment that you're very lucky to have a mother-in-law and a supported family. Because what you said about other few women, and that is true. With the stigma, it's always women's fault. And that's you should be so lucky to have a parents and the family support, and you all work together, so that's excellent. And now, do you have any suggestions or any kind of services needed for the people with autism? Can you have any suggestions for them, for the other people who may be going through?
There's so many services out there, especially now, 10 years after my son's diagnosis. There's many things, and I know it's scary when you have your child, you're here, and especially if you're an immigrant, you don't know anything about anything. It's just hard, and it can be isolating. So the best step you can do is to reach out for that help, and there's that Let Me Grow website. I guess we can put up links underneath this podcast.
Yeah, we can put. Yep.
There's different ones. There's, depending on which county you live in, you reach out to that number, a nurse will come home. Because I've lived in Hopkins, and then just to get all my ducks in a row, for my daughter, I just wanted to see where she falls on the spectrum. And she's neurotypical, but the nurse came over. Like when we were in Edina, I called that number. They sent a nurse. She did like an evaluation. She said, your daughter's fine. You're just being paranoid. So I'm like, okay. Then that's your school diagnosis. So then they would help you put, just like how we did with my son, that the school district will send the early childhood division to evaluate your child. I would say please don't wait until that kindergarten screening. Most school districts have a kindergarten screening where at the age of 4 or 3 you'd bring your child in and they have like a kindergarten evaluation readiness, and that's when they catch a lot of children who are on the autism spectrum. And that's when these interventions start. But you can actually diagnose autism as young as 6 months. Like, I forgot to tell this story, but I noticed it in Ada when he was 6 months old. Because at that time, you could get these emails from babycenter.com with a weekly development thing. And at 6 months, like, congratulations, your baby's 6 months old. And then did you know that there's this study that you can actually detect autism in babies at as young as 6 months? Does your baby line things up? Does your baby spin them? And I kid you not, I put down the computer or the phone or whatever I was looking down, and Hayden's like lining tiny cars or some baby toy up and spinning them. And I picked up the pediatrician's phone. I'm just like called on. I'm like, this is what happened. Can I bring him in, please? A pediatrician at the time hadn't seen that study. And he said, no, you can't detect it until 18 months to 2 years. So you're fine. But if you're worried, call Help Me Grow. And then the stigma and denial was in my head saying that, oh, he's fine. He's fine. I am not going to call. And I didn't call. And my one regret I'm telling everybody out there who's listening to me is I did not call. I always wonder if I hadn't waited, how much more adjusted, not better off would he have been, but how would that extra 6 months to 1 year of early intervention have helped him? I'll never know that. I will never know. And I know it's scary, and but I really encourage people to reach out. And your other option for diagnosis is a medical diagnosis. But I always recommend getting the school one first because it's less of a waiting list and you can start the school interventions right away. And for medical diagnosis, you have to call your pediatrician, and they will refer you to a behavioral pediatrician. And usually you can do Park Nicollet Alexander Center, University of Minnesota Voyager Clinic. Actually, now they have something I think called the Mind Clinic. So those are the two biggest ones. Then there are other little ones across the state that you could go to as well. But these waiting lists are a year long. So you would call, fill in the form, send it in, and it's like a year-long waiting list. So I really recommend doing that school intervention first. And what I've heard from another friend who also works as the South Asian liaison for Edina Public Schools, she sits in on these meetings called the IEP or Individualized Education Plan meeting, and she sits there with any other South Asian parent who needs her help. And what she's noticed is a lot of these parents don't want the word autism in the child's file. They don't want that stigma. They don't want it written down because they say, if we move back to India, I want to put them in a school there, and if this is on the record, they won't let them in. To which I say there are way more new schools opening up with the same to a little bit more tuition as the regular schools there that have amazing programs. And that is what your child will need when you go back, when and if you go back. And for those who are still living here, it's okay to have the autism diagnosis because that record is sealed. Like when the child leaves early childhood special education, is up to you if you want to send that record to the elementary school. So I wouldn't worry about that following your child, because as a parent, I believe it's our responsibility to prepare our children to be citizens of the world, and the only way we can do that is to give them everything they require to reach that.
that's so true, what you said. So it is important, for parents to be in charge of it. And sometimes, when you take them to pediatrician or teachers and all, they don't spend as much time. And I know as a parent, you know exactly what your child need, and also be persistent is another thing too, right? Mm-hmm. And I know you had done that. I mean, you were really on the top of it and said you sometimes educated even doctor that check this out, mm-hmm. like you did that test and you studied, you heard about that study and you went to pediatrician and say, let's do it, so just be in charge of it. So that's what I think. What do you think that how important it is for parents to talk about this autism or any disability?
I wish we would talk more about disabilities in our community because it's a part of life. Like in Minnesota now, I believe the statistic for autism is 1 in 42, and I don't know how it. They did cut it down by race, but South Asian wasn't one of the races that they cut it down to see the individual demographic. But 1 in 42. So, and when my son was diagnosed, it was 1 in 78.
Wow.
So, and it doesn't mean that autism is getting more prevalent. It's just that we're getting really, really good at finding them. Because for me personally, I'm also autistic. I found out 3 or 4 years ago. I went to the Autism Society of Minnesota. And it's true, there was one study, I can't remember if it was JAMA or the British Medical Journal, that said that if your child is autistic, chances are one or both parents are also on the spectrum. And then I was looking at autism symptoms in girls, and that's another big thing. Boys and girls don't present the same at all, because girls are good at something called masking, where they will look at other people around them and copy the behavior so they can get through and they can get by, which is what I did. So...
Okay. And the boys don't, kind of.
Boys don't. Boys are easier to diagnose. And for adults on the spectrum, I really recommend Autism Society of Minnesota. And they also have a bit of a waiting list, but it's good to go in. And I remember coming home from getting the diagnosis, and my husband says, that explains a lot.
A lot of things you do. Yes. Yeah, and the life can get easier once you know it, instead of, judging somebody who they're not, So that definitely is a help. Now, what do you think about how you're close to the SEWA, and how you think the SEWA has been doing with autistic
I am
program?
excited for the Sapna program. I just wish more people would take advantage of it, because going back to the stigma, it's like people would reach out and say, yeah, but I don't want to tell anybody about it. Can we not share about it? And I am so excited for this mentorship program. I would love to meet more families out there and help them, guide them through this process, because it is a process. And I would just encourage people to reach out, sign up for the program, and the step forward starts with you and all the people out there. And if you need the help, there is no shame in reaching out. And I know that stigma can be terrifying, and the thing of like, what will other people think? It doesn't matter what other people will think, because at the end of the year, when your child is 30 or 40 and you look back on everything that you could have done to make their life easier, but you didn't because you were worried about what other people think. And then what will you do with yourself?
Yeah, then the time is gone.
Yeah.
So act now, and and be proud of your son or daughter or whoever has any disability. That doesn't bring them down. No. So, no. Well, I think we've learned a lot from you, Feroza, today, and we appreciate you coming here and talking to us. And if anyone has any questions, they can contact SEWA, or you can get in touch with Feroza through us also. So.
Oh, there's one more thing I wanted to add, though. The
Okay.
people listening out there, like, they might hear my accent and think that maybe, oh, she probably grew up here, so she doesn't know about our culture as much. But I just wanted people to know that, no, I do. I have Indian parents. I married my husband who grew up in India till he was 21. So I do get it. So just because you hear my accent's a little different or I don't have one, I just want people to know that I do understand and I do want to help you. And I've done this podcast because I want to help others, because I remember I felt so alone. And I remember going to my first Autism Speaks walk, and that's a whole other kettle of fish, Autism Speaks. A lot of adult autistics don't like them for different reasons. But I remember finally not feeling alone, because the whole Mall of America was full of families and children. So you're not alone. It's a big community out there, and it can help you meet a lot of people and connect to you. So reach out.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you so much, Feroza.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So